Good evening. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of the School of Board of Directors of the Upper Dublin School District. We are ready now we're going to jump right into our presentations. We have a Pupil Services Budget presentation from Ms. Clegg.
Thank you. Okay, the following represents the 2019-20 Pupil Services budget with a projection for 1 year ahead to 2021. As always, I'd like to start off with Pupil Services Department focus. And so the second slide really addresses in essence, the buckets for the areas where we're investing our funding, continually looking at staffing, professional development to make sure that we're using research-based programming with fidelity, and that we're making sure that we maintain compliance with the chapters of law 14, 15, and 16. We're almost finished with our upgrading of our technology, but we continue to keep a bucket open for those needs, particularly assistive technology for our students who require it for communication and participation, and then wellness. So we are looking at the particular focus of mental health and drug and alcohol addictions. So the investments for continued growth section, I want to start off with staffing. We are going to look to, again, moving forward for 1920 and 2021, reallocate our teaching staff as needed to meet the needs of our students as they matriculate through the district. So we're not asking in the next 2 years for more staff, but we will have to have some consideration for moving staff around. And we have those conversations in the spring. I am looking to increase psychologist staff from 4.9 to 5.9. If you remember, I did ask for that last year, and based on the priorities at that time, based on the priorities at that time, that was not meant to be, but I did want to circle back, and I can give you some data on that to show you why. Push the big red button. If you click on the link for staffing, oh, I did not touch that one. According to the National Association for School Psychologists, there's a recommendation that for every one psychologist, you have 500 to 700 students attributed to that psychologist. Based on our numbers right now, our number is about at 832 per psychologist. And the district data, which was taken a month ago, because I was originally to present in November, does represent what the psychologists reported for last year in the number of initials and reevaluations. The initials represent special education evaluations, gifted evaluations, and then our reevaluations. And you can see their numbers down here. I summarized in the chart based by psychologist. They are in the 80s to 100 by the end of last year. And this year, based on the ones that are in queue, and these numbers actually are higher now, you can see we're over halfway there, if not more, because I do have the in queue. Psychologists know who their reevaluations are all the way through July at this point. So they're working extra hard. They are accountable for helping the schools with mental health supports. And so it is getting daunting for these 4.9 individuals to continue to maintain compliance. For initial, in particular, special education, we have to have those reports done 60 calendar days from when a parent signs. That's tracked by the state in what's called Table 8A. And if we are late with even one evaluation over a course of 2 examination periods or 2 quarters, then the district's placed on an improvement plan. I can tell you that we were late the last quarter. This quarter, we're on track to be on time with all of our initials. I asked the psychologists, and again, they are Act 93, so the expectation is not that it's a 8 to 4 day. But I did want them to share how much time they're putting in at night and on the weekends, and everyone is putting in at least 5 to 10 extra hours above the workday to stay in compliance. And that is, again, a very tight line that we're walking right now as it is. So again, I'd like to circle back to you to ask for that 6th psychologist would be 5.9. We have one psychologist, Joe LeCone, who does not work on Wednesdays, but then he works throughout the summer. So his FTE is a 0.9. Professional development is looking pretty robust for the next couple of years. We are looking for we are recommending in January a new IEP writing program, and that will require some training for our staff from January through June so that we can be operating at full tilt in July of next year. We are going to be able to run both programs, IEP plus our recommended program concurrently, so that there's not a stress that one program gets cut off and then you have to live in the other program. So we will be able to work through both programs this winter and spring, but there will be training associated with that. We continue to do research-based program training. We have many teachers now going back to Wilson certifications, visualizing and verbalizing. There are several programs that we require for our students, so we're making sure that our teachers are trained. The Math 180, the Read 180, System 44 continues to have training as needed. The PATHS curriculum is something that's new in our emotional support program and counseling programs, and we're continuing to expand in that program. And we're having consideration to expand our Second Step program. Pennsbury School District, we went to visit them, Sarah Rothman and I, last year. They have adopted the Second Step program, and their teachers actually teach the curriculum. They bought the curriculum, their teachers teach the curriculum. We currently use Marikay, which is Northwest Human Services. We have folks that come in, so it's a third-party vendor. It's at no cost to us because we get the funding through our PAYS funding, but there's a lot of positive feedback on these programs. And so we do have to consider whether or not we want to bring that on board with our own staff, buy the curriculum, and then expand it further. Right now, every building is a little bit different. Consistently, there's kindergarten. Every kindergarten has the Second Step program, but depending on what elementary building you're in, and the middle school uses portions of Second Step. This one, it's always as we go. Right now, I did replace most of the workstations for our secretaries. All the psychologists got new laptops and such, so I think we're okay here unless we need some assistive technology that I'm not aware of at this point. And then we're going to continue again on the mental health and wellness. We have the parent nights and the workshops scheduled to help our families work with their students. So far, we've done be a part of the conversation, mock teen room, cyber 101, speak up, gender 101. Cyber 101 is coming in January, so it's going to help you with that. What's nice about most of those are, many of them are free, which is nice. Not speak up. PTO helps us out with that. This is our district-wide program profile that I always like to revisit, giving you a lens of what our FTE was prior to this year, and then projecting 2 years forward. And as I said, we're not looking to expand the FTEs for our learning support, autistic support, emotional support, and life skills support programs. You'll notice at the very bottom, instruction in the home, though, is different. We used to have a district teacher who provided the instruction in the home, but due to the caseload management, that teacher is now in the building, so the instruction in the home is handled by the mobile support folks at Lakeside. I wanted to show you this so that you get a sense of the FTE allocation for teacher positions across district. And again, a reminder of what the state says is an allowable caseload, which we never exceed. You can see we've grown though from 2010, at 11.9% of our students have IEPs, through we're at 14.4% now. So we continue to grow in our special education identification. The state average is 16%, so we're still below the state, but we're slowly creeping up in the amount of students who are identified. Our related service providers, we did increase a speech therapist early on in 16-17. We increased an occupational therapist in 17-18, and everything else has remained steady. The guidance counselors, that's always a topic that you guys are, want to know more about, and making sure that we do have enough guidance counselors represented across our buildings. We have asked last year and in the past for an additional guidance counselor at the high school. I am still maintaining that in abeyance, as I feel the psychologist is the priority. And if I was to say what is most needed, that is what's most needed. However, I do want to send just a reminder of the conversation of the high school with the prospects of an additional counselor down the road, whether it's next year or the year after. The data here does link for you. It shows the counselor to student ratio, and then it also compares with our neighboring school districts. And our peer districts. The nurses, we're steady with our 8 nurses, keeping in mind that they're not all certified school nurses. So at the elementary level, we have 2 certified school nurses and 2 staff nurses, and they go back and forth in the buildings because the certified school nurses are the only ones that have the authority to do certain tasks, like participate in 504 meetings, etc. The middle school, we have a certified school nurse and a staff nurse, and same at the high school. Keeping in mind the ratios, because I think that's important, the recommendation is 1,500 students to 1 nurse, and we are certainly within compliance of that. But when we add for our certified school nurses, their responsibilities to our private schools, so that would be Open Door, Montgomery, Good Shepherd, Wordsworth, Our Lady of Mercy, etc. Everyone is ranging from 1,105 to 1 to the highest is 1,342 to 1. So I just wanted you to be aware of those numbers. We're not asking for more nurses, but certainly wanted you to be aware of the ratio that where we are at this current time. The special ed paraprofessionals have gone up since 2017-18, but we would project that for the next 2 years we will maintain at 62.5. With, again, the caveat that we will reassign them based on the needs of the students in the programs. As far as the pupil services department, we don't recommend any increase or decrease of the department staff next year or the year after. The revenue budget assumptions. So base IDEA, child count, just December 1 child count we just reported. That's really important because we get funding from, we get federal funding based on the number of students that we report as having IEPs. So our award letter for 18-19 is a little over $500,000. And that is what our estimate is, which is about $50,000 or $60,000 more than it was the year prior. Access funding, we see a jump in that for 2018-19. We don't have any sense of what, Jen, please jump in, what will be in the years to follow, but we're pretty consistent with that. We use that money to pay for our Lakeside counselor/social workers. That's where the predominant amount of that money goes. Contingency fund grant, that is when we submit applications for our students who have extraordinary expenses. Last year we received $134,976.15. The ceiling to that allocation is $150,000. So we're hoping to get that much this year. We haven't gotten the max in the last couple of years, but we usually are in the 130s. So I think we could safely project that based on the applications, which are the same students this year as they were last year, that we would get the same amount of funding. SHARS is what the nurses complete for their services, and that usually hovers in the $90,000. So those are all assumptions that we can count on moving forward. We don't know about the fair share for the MCIU. We used to have 5 classrooms from the MCIU in our buildings. We now have 3. So based on that, our funding, that number will go down. This is always my favorite ones. I'm going to slow down a little bit and celebrate. The baseline, our out-of-district IEPs and our agreements. So these are costly, and these really account for a lot of the special education money aside from salaries and benefits, clearly, which is the biggest part of the pie. But based on our baseline from 2013-14, we had 51 students who were placed out of the district either through an IEP or through a service agreement. The baseline was $3 million dedicated just to that budget line. Over the course of several years, we've dropped from 2.5 to 1.9 to 1.8. We are projecting 1.7 and 1.6. So based on us cutting that budget line in half over the course of 7 years. And I guess the important part is to stress is it's not at the expense of the students' programs. The students' programs are rich, they're full, and more importantly, they're delivered in the least restrictive environment. Most of our students have either left us and graduated, matriculated out, or they came back. We have kids, most of them we bring back. This data report here is a point of pride. Oh no. Can you, did we get it back? My favorites. To the top? Here? Here?
One more.
This one?
Right there.
Yeah, but no, I'm trying to get to this link. You guys have it? Okay, if you guys have it, then I'm fine. I have it memorized because it's my favorite. Okay. All right. Oh, if I refresh it, it'll be okay? All right, just refresh it and I'm going to try again. But I do have it memorized because it is my favorite page. So recently this is a report that is on display on the state website. But the reason that I like it is that it reports our students who are out of the district or least restrictive environment. Most recently, we had the compliance monitors come in to look at our entire soup to nuts special education program. And we had a compliance monitor who went through everything and he wanted to meet with our administrators and talk about all the things that we're proud of. And I started with we had 51 students, we're down to very few students who are outplaced. At the time, we had 11 IEP students, the others were agreement students. This only reported the IEP students. And I said, so we're really proud of the dramatic decrease of the number of students who were placed out of the district. And he said, well, the state is 4.9% of your students. That's our threshold. And you exceeded it, so you're going to be on an improvement plan. I said, I can't be. So I lost sleep all night. The next day, they were there for 3 days. They were there the day that it snowed. So they stayed in the hotel, they came back, and I just kept saying, it can't be. I know we're really, really low. So we bring up the chart and look at it. And I said, I see what the issue is. The last column, if you look on the grid on the top right, you see to the far right where it says in other settings, you see that dark blue bar that says 4.9%. The light blue, that's the state threshold. The light blue bar shows the district. There was no light blue bar. And so he was reading the 4.9 thinking it was us. And he goes, oh my goodness, your bar is not even represented because it's so low. He said, I've been doing this for decades. I've never ever seen it before. So he apologized. I was really excited, and this has been my story that I've probably told 100 times. So I apologize.
101.
Yeah, we've all heard it. I said in cabinets. But that's pretty remarkable to have somebody from the state say, I've never ever seen that before. And so we're very proud that we have our kids with us. And that's a lot of work on behalf of our teachers and our teams, and also a shift in culture and the belief that all students belong in their buildings with their peers. Service providers are the same, and you can see how much we spent for each one of those. Physical therapist funding does come out of IDEA money. Personal home health is one particular nurse that rides on the bus for student needs, and our district dentist and physician are on there as well. Technology, I'm not going to steal Phil's thunder regarding what the new schools will be in the cost. I had some, $87,000 to not include the phone, the robo phone. So that's why it's a little bit lower, Phil, than what you had on your slide. IEP Plus was $33,187. The program that we're recommending to the board will have an annual cost of $10,000. The first year is going to be a startup fee that's going to make that around $14,000, but then it will be $10,000 from that point moving forward, which is a frontline product. The teachers are familiar through using Frontline for other purposes. And then we will have more extra money in that savings to dedicate towards the e-schools or the new the Infinite Campus product. HMH has to do with our Read 180, Math 180, System 44 programs. And our cost for this year, we estimate will be about the same. Naviance represents grades 6 through 12. Our iPads that's a yearly fee, our Apple Care fees. We won't need to replace any workstations or laptops, and we did cut Play-Doh, which is a savings of $6,000. But we are looking to use the MVP program as needed. You approved at the last budget meeting $8,000 for 3 students to get the MVP program, which is a virtual program. Charter school tuitions. This is always an interest of the board, so I want to make sure that it was included. You can see the jump in how much it costs for a regular ed student and a special education student. Right now we have a total of 15 students that are in charter school, and this is the cost associated. The countywide comparisons, I hope that's coming out good. I did this in 2016-17 when we were originally asked for the number of students, then the number of students that were in the charter. I also went to the PA Future Ready Index that just most recently posted for each of these schools, and so that you can see their new charter enrollment. Many have gone up dramatically. Upper Dublin went up 3 over the course of that time frame. Our projected savings for the next 2 years, again, this reflects the decrease of $100,000, 1920, and then another $100,000 in 2021. We are keeping the cost plan the same. 5 years ago, when it was at $550,000, we are staying steady at $300,000, and we haven't really even used all of it at the conclusion of each year, which is good. That way, we have some to give back to the general fund if it's necessary, or to reallocate to other areas as needed. Lakeside, we have not placed anyone at Lakeside. It's a great placement, but we haven't had the need for Lakeside placements for a while. So I did not purchase any slots. You know, the risk with slots is if you buy them and then you don't use them, you still buy them. So I am calculating on the per diem if we need it. And typically those are for students who require a more intensive program, or students who are perhaps in the regular ed or special ed program who have had a drug or weapons violation. It is an AEDY school. We have 3 students that will be graduating or turning 21 at the end of this year, so I know that we will get money back. And that's where, to that $100,000, that decrease. I feel comfortable making the decrease without worrying. Early intervention, you can see the numbers. Keeping that at that budget for 100,000, but we haven't really come close to that. There's the next slide talks about where the IDEA money goes. And then final general fund budget lines show by department, how much money is allocated by department, then the decrease over since 2016, 17 to 2020, 21. You can tell I like round numbers, so I try to get everything 40s, 30s, 40, but we've stayed within that. And so I feel very comfortable proposing to the board that that's where we can be again next year. Questions?
Thank you, Ms. Clegg. Does anyone have any questions, comments?
Just kind of looking at the very last slide, what do those numbers represent? Those are costs other than salary and benefits? Okay.
Under the service providers, you list a pool council and PD. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Pool counsel is Andrew Faust from Sweet Stevens, Katz and Williams. We have worked with him through pool counsel here in Upper Dublin probably within the last 4 years. So that is not a new cost. We access him. Pool counsel is basically, he services many districts across the state. People write in questions, he answers the questions. The questions go out to everybody, so you're learning not only your questions, but the questions of all of your peers. Very valuable. He also spends 10 days in our district and 10 full days that we break up into providing legal advisement to our supervisors and myself, and then professional development to different groups. This year our focus is on progress monitoring. So he has been working with all of our related service providers and special ed teachers to write better progress monitoring. And it's a big help for all of us as we continue to strive to maintain compliance in all of our documents.
And you also mentioned that there's some outreach for families and parents. Do you collect any feedback on the usefulness of those sessions, and how are you using that feedback?
It's a great question. I mean, the feedback is usually from the participants who go, and the feedback from the counselors and the psychologists and the administrators and the teachers as to what is needed kind of drives where we go with our monthly sessions for parents. We have a spring mental health summit. Well, this coming spring will be our 3rd summit, where we bring together administrators, psychologists, counselors, and we talk about what's going well. We track our hospitalization data, we track our risk assessment data, we look at the nature and the antecedents of student stress, and then we try to target that within our sessions for our parents. The one piece of feedback that I do consistently get is that parents don't come out, unfortunately, for all the things we'd like them to. And some of the things, there's fear of being stigmatizing, so if you have a big night on suicide prevention, you're not going to capture all the people who might benefit from that. So we're looking to perhaps have them taped and then just have them as video links on the People Services websites, and the people can watch them at home. And that might be, it won't be as interactive, but still gives them access to the information, because as great as these things are, we're not getting, the number of people that we'd like to see there.
On slide 10, where you're looking at all the numbers of staff, you have asterisks that say private school, and the only asterisk is the physical therapist, but How many of the nurses really support private schools?
By law, we have to have our CSNs do it. We can't have our staff nurses go. So our 4 staff, our CSNs go to the private schools. The staff nurses cover, I actually have the staff nurses cover the CSNs so that they can go, because we dedicate at least 8 hours or more to every private school per month. Where else do I have an asterisk? Just there, right? Yeah. Oh, physical therapist. Our physical therapist is not a district employee. She is a contracted provider. Everybody else that's represented on this page, though, is a district employee.
Just 2 quick questions. I always get the bad microphone. You had mentioned that some of the staff is being trained in some programs, outside programs such as visualizing and verbalizing. Are we taking steps to have those staff members trained to then train internally? And also just curious about the numbers we're seeing with the charter enrollments. It does continue to grow. I know there was some brief discussion last year about the possibility of, researching why that's growing and talking to those families about maybe stemming the tide on that piece.
I know that you've made that effort, so I'll defer to you on that piece. But as far as, and again, visualizing and verbalizing, that we did some staff trained a few years ago. We haven't had since. That one came to my mind. Wilson, most recently, we've had a couple teachers trained in Wilson. The Read 180, the Math 180, System 44. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess what I would say is the products, what they'll say is they are not implemented with fidelity unless the folks are trained by their trainers. So we haven't done a lot of turnaround training. We can't, particularly like in Wilson. Visualizing and verbalizing is highly specialized. We don't have the ability to do that. We just send them. I mean, the Wilson training is a year long. It takes teachers a long time to get that level 1 cert. Steve, do you want to talk about charter schools?
Earlier this fall, I reached out personally to all of the families of students that are in charter school. Many of them have never even been in our school system. I do have some time in January for 2 families that are coming in to have a conversation about enrolling here. The reasons that families are choosing charter schools are really almost as unique as the kids themselves. Some parents are opting for charters because charters offer different things. They almost act as magnet schools. Some of the parents and families were unaware of some of the offerings that we have, especially in the area of upper level sciences and technology. And some are just families that have never ever been here and have no connection with the school district. So we're trying to bring some of those students back to the district.
All right, so are there any other comments or questions for Ms. Cliff?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We will now move on right away to Mr. Vinogradov.
This way, Mr. Shantis won't be texting me in the middle of my presentation. Just look into the microphone and just be natural.
One of the, before Mr. Vinogradov presents, Mrs. Sherbier asked a question about full council, and I know it's going to come up in Philip's presentation as well. One of the things that I want to mention about full council, if you'll just indulge me for a second, Sweet Stevens, that law firm has been very strategic about specializing in the area of technology and in the area of special education. And the depth of their experience and knowledge in those 2 areas are really invaluable. So one of the things that I feel very strongly about in our budget is the money that we spend on full council saves us exponentially more money by avoiding missteps, especially in the area of special education.
Thank you. All right, so I have the two versions, right? The deep philosophical vision building version, and which I've been told not to give. So, and so I'm gonna go through budget. The budget process is a nice pause, though. It's we look at where we were, where we are, and where we want to go. Right? So it's a nice piece of strategic planning, and we've done a lot in a short amount of time, and we're getting to a place of being able to look at a 5-year view that's vision driven and plan. Like we've hit a plateau, and it's not a plateau in innovation or in growth in what we're doing. It's just a plateau in terms of fiscal spending. So again, we look at some big numbers tonight, and so I always start with my little pie. So the green is the district budget, and the little slice of blue is technology. But we oversee a lot in technology, everything from the devices that we all use for teaching and learning, to the hardware in classrooms, to everything that's invisible behind the walls in working with facilities, and we just support all areas of the district with that small slice fiscally, but also a very small team. And of that slice, we break it out, right? So we get a look at our hardware lease, our classroom hardware, for making things invisible, and then again, the invisible pieces. The services that we pay for, whether those are subscription services or smart nets on our hardware, and the actual IT hardware that's behind the walls. And we're going to dive into the spreadsheet in a little bit, and I'll highlight areas of it. But again, we want to do that little bit of vision reminder that all of these investments are instructionally driven. Number one, these are the big buckets, right? Access to the tools and resources we need for collaboration and creation. Professional development, right? The goal is to leverage these tools in transformative ways and really support personalization, efficient feedback, differentiation of our pillars. And we're always looking at innovation and development. This is a year where coding and algorithmic thinking as a literacy is happening in all 4 of our elementary libraries, along with some robotics. And we have design thinking happening in our 2 secondary libraries. Really an integrated part of the curriculum, and that's the kind of growth in thinking that we're supporting. The ongoing big request, and we're really excited that with some changes in enrollment this year, that we'll probably be able to do this, and that is for an additional instructional technology specialist, and that would allow us to have Mr. Lieberman focus on secondary and somebody dedicated to the 4 buildings. In having an instructional specialist work with teachers, the best model is a before, during, and after model, BDA model, where you design together in advance, you co-teach a model to build capacity with students and teachers, and then you reflect and refine after. And currently, there's a 2 to 3 week wait time to be able to work with Mr. Lieberman. And we can get that down to a week with the addition of 1 more person, and that's probably our greatest return on investment. Right, and that's to support this shift, which I've talked about a lot, right, from the sort of monologic model of teachers, the conduit of content, to a model where we're building capacity for kids to be knowledge creators. And again, my favorite slide, right? EdTech tools have no place in compliance-based instruction. They don't support it. They challenge it, but they really don't support it. And compliance-based instruction is highly efficient, but it's very ineffective form of instruction. Empowerment-based instruction is very effective, but not very efficient. It's hard for the teachers to do, and that's where these tech tools can come into place to make student thinking visible, to afford efficient feedback, etc. So moving away from the actual classroom practice and the tools we support, there's hardware. And we have an ongoing classroom refresh, and we now then we had a STEM morning in the morning, and people presenting, and I was able to show her, I was like, when you taught on this portion, oh my God, it's horrible. So this year we will be refreshing the high school, and after which we're going to be caught up and move into a 5-year refresh cycle with a small bump for when Sandy Run is ready for its new building. And over there on the right-hand side, you see an elementary teacher exploring deserts with her kids. And so you see the contrast there. And then there's the invisible parts, right? The parts that are behind the wall. We have ongoing preparation for a jump to a 10 gig connection. So currently we enjoy a 1 gig connection, and the pipe is a 10 gig jump, so it's an increment. Not that we're going to jump to 10 gigs internet bandwidth from the IU, but I would love to double our speed next year to 2 gigs. So I just need to make the pipe bigger, and we've been investing in the infrastructure to do that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the spreadsheet. And you see there our wireless upgrade and refresh. So we did the whole high school this summer, and now we have a plan that just phases through all the buildings. And again, I think that will be more of a 6 to 7 year cycle for refresh for our APs, and a data center refresh that I will touch on. So we published the spreadsheet, and we've had time to look at it, and I don't want to go line by line. You'll see I have some areas highlighted in yellow, and those are the cells that I really want to focus on. So the first one, we have the lease hardware, and you'll see that suddenly we stop with the devices in 2 to 4. And what's happening is that we've changed our Chromebook paradigm so that you don't graduate and take it with you, but when a graduating class leaves, we recoup those Chromebooks. And those Chromebooks are the ones that are going to 2 to 4. So as the current 2 to 4 devices will start to expire next year, rather than replace them, they're going to be replaced with the fall off from the secondary level. And so now we just have this sustained amount moving forward. We will do big refresh, and then new devices for kids entering our one-to-one. So that would always be rising 5th graders, and then again rising 8th graders. So it's like 2 small grade levels, big refresh, 2 small, big refresh. That would be moving down the spreadsheet. Oops, sorry. Press the button. Moving down the spreadsheet to the next highlighted yellow, you see an increase in what I call the troll bridge. So Crown Castle, formerly Sunesis, is the fiber we lease for our wide area network. And we don't own the fiber. We have no choice. So I call it the troll bridge. This is the cost we pay. When we renegotiated our contract with them, we locked in pricing for if we ever go from 1 gig to 10 gig, what will that be? And so there you see the jump. So at the point that we become ready to go to 10 gig, that lease will be $80,000 a year. Very few districts invest in their own fiber. Lower Moreland does, because that is a run across the street. Right? It's not big, but in a district like ours, it's not useful. Our classroom refresh, you'll see this one will be the most expensive this summer, and that's that big interactive monitor. That refresh is the biggest this summer because we're doing the high school. And then after that, you see the number that will be the normal number in any given part of the 5-year cycle. We will enter a cycle where we do one-third of all the elementaries. So instead of building by building, we have that equity, 1/3 of all elementaries for 3 years, high school, middle school. We'll just be in a predictable cycle. And then we have the firewall refresh, right? That's another big one. So our current firewall is really not that old, but it can only handle 1 gig of throughput. And so we've been making our strategic investments. We don't want to have a bottleneck. So we've been making those strategic investments, and this is the last one that we'll have to make. You see right above that the wireless refresh. So you see this cascade where we're just going to be doing building after building after building. And then eventually we will cycle back to the bigger buildings, Sandy Run and the high school. So I'm going to leave the spreadsheet, I'll leave it up there. I'm going to come back to the presentation because in conjunction with looking at our technology budget, and as Michelle alluded, in looking at with special ed, coordinating with special ed, we want to take a look at our student information system. So our current version of eSchool is end of life this year. So we have to make a choice of either upgrading eSchool, and that upgrade includes no change in functionality, just upgrades. And the only change is that administrators would be able to access it on Chrome. But there's no other function. Or we pick a new student information system. And so the function of the student information system is maintenance of student records. It's really, really important. A lot of internal administrative workflows, scheduling, discipline, attendance, etc., and state reporting. We use a third-party platform for messaging. We use an add-on for online registration that no one's really satisfied with. And there are a lot of modern things we would like. We would love to have a mobile app, so parents can see it, so that when I do my online registration, I'm at the doctor and I have my vaccination form, I just take a picture of it and upload it, right? That kind of modern convenience. To be able to have messages go out for the user to say, I want these as emails, and I want these as text messages. And for us to be able to send out a text message when there's a snow day, like that's just, I get a text message when Monlock Park is closed, for soccer, so that's a modern thing. It would be great to have fee collection built in, right? So that I can go and get an alert saying, hey, do I want my child to go on this field trip? Yes, and here's the $15 I'm paying, right? The account will be linked. And then for our administrative efficiencies, to have some scheduling platform that is much more intuitive for counselors to use. Kid is enrolling in the middle of the year, that can really be doing the brunt of the scheduling work for Rob Albert and Chris Michener, because at the secondary level you have very sophisticated schedules. Be able to do quick ad hoc reporting to find out for like athletic eligibility and all of these normal things, right? And so this is our timeline. Last spring, we did a needs assessment and developed a spreadsheet of criteria with a huge group of stakeholders from across the district. We then submitted that criteria to 4 leaders in the student information system market. And North Penn was ahead of us in that search. And I reached out to them and a few other school districts who were ahead of us. And I said, hey, give me your top 4 or 5. Give me your top 4 or 5, right? Because we didn't need to go through 12. We had submissions from Alma, Infinite Campus, Howard School, and Skyward. And in November, we brought that stakeholder group here for detailed presentations, half day each from all 4. From that, we chose to move forward with Infinite Campus and had them in a couple of weeks ago for all-day deeper dive and kicking the tires on the system again with each of those stakeholder groups. There's a link through, we won't go, for you to look at the evaluation criteria. So you're really bored, you can go in and see all of the different categories we did, all of the metrics, and all of the responses from Infinite Campus. Infinite Campus also, no one on the committee knew the price. Infinite Campus is comparable to all of the others in its year 1 implementation cost, and is about 1/3 lower in its annual cost after, right? So it's a huge cost savings for us. Strategically, I would love to have board approval in January so that we can move forward with a February parallel implementation. So that in February, we would start to do all of the migration and then go live in August. This would avoid us doing what a larger school district like North Penn has to do, which is they have to pay for 2 student information systems at the same time to take a whole year to do their migration. Wissahickon, our neighbor, our size, but we would have to begin that right away in February to be able to safely hit an August go live date. And I would want to avoid a October go live date. That would be a disaster. Here's that cost difference. So eSchool and School Messenger, our messaging platform together, we spend $95,000 a year annually. Infinite Campus would have an initial cost of $140,000, and then it would transition to $60,000 annually. That $140,000 includes this half of the year, the initial start, and all of next year. So we're looking for the first 18 months would be $140,000. So of that we pay a third now, but we submitted to this board meeting their proposal. And that includes full migration, professional development, our campus messenger, so that replaces School Messenger, the online registration module, and the fee module. Now I will introduce questions. That's it.
Does anyone have any comments or questions, committee members?
I have more comments and questions. I'm very happy that you're gonna get another instructional technology support person. I was hoping we could do that last year, but I think it's really good. I remember from before we even had technology, when I was reading things and lobbying for it, this is pre-Phil, about the use of technology. You're leaving a lot of the value on the table if you don't have professional development and support. So that I'm very happy about. So I'll let other people speak to Infinite Campus because there's a lot of excitement here.
I'm going next.
Since I had to drive to Sandy around this morning with a payment for a field trip my child forgot, I'm pretty excited right now. In all seriousness, as you mentioned, we have in North Penn started some of this work, and I think just the fact that everything is talking on one platform is huge. It's very complex otherwise as a staff person, let alone as a parent. Two quick questions. In terms of Infinite Campus, I know we don't have any decision-making role at this point, but is there going to be a resource that maybe you can put out after we vote on this to kind of show families a YouTube video, some marketing materials, just to kind of show us what we're heading for, to get people primed for that, or some kind of just display here that we can see one night. And also, I know the PTOs and PTAs have been very active in using the current student information registration system to generate directories, and I know that's going to be a point of interest. Is that something we're going to continue to be able to do?
Yeah. So part of onboarding the new system is to work with Infinite Campus on PD for parents, and so again that begins first with celebratory early messaging, preview of it, and then also managing expectations. So I'm always hesitant to say it will do this magic thing, and then the magic thing, well, actually it takes 4 steps to do the magic thing. Right? So I'm cautious about that, and I want to work with them to be very honest about what are they doing, how are they doing it. I have a nice relationship with the tech directors, both North Penn and Wissahickon, and so there's a lot to be learned together around that, right? And pulling resources, and we've already been doing that work. Your second question was about the directories. So regardless of your student information system, directories run up against the challenge of human beings. So getting that information to parents, right, like at the beginning of the school year is tough. You still have a lot of parents who just haven't completed, for any number of reasons, the online demographic update. And then you're getting that information out to a printer, et cetera, et cetera. I've spoken with a few of the PTA presidents, and I would like to pilot this spring, reaching out to families that we have here to say, independent of all that, would you like to be in the we would like to have directories ready in September. Which is, this is the school you're going to, this is the school your child is going to. Would you like to be in that directory? And so and then having our registrar as another point of entry for all new families coming in, whether they're coming into 6th grade or kindergarten. Would you like to be in the PTO directory? What information would you like in there? I think that if we capture it in the spring and through the registration process of the summer, we can get that information off to, and we're not waiting on this, that we really, like, I think that's just a smarter way to do it. It's more of a human way to do it. And it's its own thing to be excited about, right? At the end of the year, to be already thinking about next year and the fall and building community. So that's happening in parallel.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Mark.
I have two nitty-gritty specific questions. One is there's a line for endpoint protection that shows a steady decrease, a slow but steady decrease over the years. Is that a reduction in Windows computers driving that? Is that what that is?
Absolutely.
Because anything that decreases over time is always a little bit of a surprise in a budget.
Yeah. So that's it's exactly it. We're just phasing out those Windows devices. Whenever one of the big things that drives that is our classroom refresh. When we refresh, the teacher desktop goes away, and it's a radical shift for a lot of teachers. There is still a PC, but it's this big monitor now. And you have the Chromebook, and you have that. And for some teachers, there is this security in their workflow or efficiency in their workflow that they still have tethered to the PC and the Office suite. And so while that's disconnected from the board, because we still don't want them seated during class, we want them untethered from the board and be able to move around, we keep that workstation. And typically we say, okay, this can stay here as a bridge until it dies. And somewhere in November we get an email saying, you pull the dinosaur out, right? And so that's okay. We leave it as a bridge. And if we can accommodate, we accommodate during that transition. And so that number is just ticking down and down.
So it's ticking down very slowly at the pace that's shown here. It would be 17 years before it's gone. Is that
So
realistic?
at some point, when Google enables desktop as a service, right? Because there will be applications that we want that certain manufacturers will strategically design to only run on a local machine because that's their profit mechanism. And we'll still need those applications. And so for as long as we need them until we have something like desktop as a service, which essentially have some web servers that are hosting that for me and I'm going in. That's not there yet. So, and when it's there, though, that's where I anticipate you'll have the radical drop.
Okay, my other question is regarding the firewall replacement. You have a 1-year budget in 1920, $40,000 to replace it, but presumably, and most firewall implementations are an annual fee. Is that captured somewhere else, or is this really a one-time purchase?
No, I mean that's the one-time replacement of. So where the annual fees are up above in our, they're a different line. In the 300s, 600. Thank you. So 658 somewhere. Yes, our VM supports SmartNets, all of those things. That in that 64,000. Yeah, that's where all of that annual licensing is in. It's in that chunk there, and so that actually stays the same. Right? Yeah. Well, I mean that will go up eventually a little bit here.
Right, I see it now. And the same thing is true for the VM server replacement and the VMware support.
Yep.
Is in those two.
All of those recurring costs are up above there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Any other comments, questions? Go ahead, Tasia.
I see you're going out to 22 with Sandy Run. hopefully at some point coming online. Do you expect a bump again in your budget?
You know, that's gonna be a piece that, I'm looking at this out of this, that's gonna be a piece that will unfold really over the next year. All right, I'm going to, you know, what equipment will we move? And what equipment will be new there? So there are pieces that we know will be brand new, right? So the entire network infrastructure there will be brand new. But the access points, some aren't that old, right? And so what will I do at that point? I'm going to know better next year. I have that big increase there in the interactive monitors. I'm anticipating that reflects, I'm replacing everything. But just this year, I put in a lot of large interactive flat panels, right? More than likely, they're all going to go over to the new building. So what you see there is my most conservative number. If I had to replace everything in 2 years, that's what it would be. In a year, that number will change. But it's better to budget conservatively and, you know, sort of project worst case scenario from that. And I anticipate being at half of that really.
And then the question about your Infinite Campus. I mean, it looks like it's a much more centralized system that has lots of, or we can get rid of a lot of redundancies. But with that is also the other part, access to different people. I'm assuming that you have got an input from the various users of systems and not just counselors, teachers, but also nurses, other people who might be needing access.
Yeah, if you click through, you know, to the criteria spreadsheet, you see the scope of who's consulted, right? So everybody from nurses, counselors, teachers, administrators. We specifically also made sure we doubled up to have, like myself, folks who work in the district, but we're also parents. We experience this as a parent, and my login and my interface with that system is very different as a parent. So I was able to, you know, have more than just me, but all the parents that we could. Already we're in the district. That was just a natural fit. Come be a part of this. You can evaluate it on both sides.
Yes, on this Infinite Campus, said 60,000 for each subsequent year after 18 months. Is that a locked-in rate for so many years?
Yeah. So the contract that they gave us locks it in for I have to review it again. I think it's 1 or 2 years, and then you know these things will typically go up. But we currently spend 80,000 on eSchool, right? So that gives you that contrast. Like, so right away, the delta that we begin saving right away is significant.
Okay.
And obviously, like later, once you've implemented, right, and it's time to renew, that's where you do sort of like the big meeting. You know, are we going to renew 2 years? Are we going to renew 5 years? Often, if you renew longer, you save money, but you have to be really comfortable and confident in the product.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Oh, go ahead, sorry, Steve.
I'm sorry, I just, this item for Infinite Campus is our first item to discuss when we get to what would move ahead for board approval. So if there's questions for Phil at this point,
Right,
that
because
proposal.
we want to know if we can move it to the meeting in January.
So when we started talking about the student information management system this year, knowing the work that Philip did last year, we made it abundantly clear that the system needed to work for Philip and for our schedulers and for everyone. And I was very hopeful that Infinite Campus would come out as the top choice, and I'm very glad that it did. I just want to reiterate my support for and my request again to move it forward to the legislative meeting. This type of undertaking, as Philip will attest to and has already spoken to, is really huge, and it will give us a nice runway to get moving. The other thing that I think is also great about the presentation that Philip gave tonight The second instructional technology specialist that we will be able to provide for next year through some efficiencies due to changes in enrollment is really going to help that return on investment. Our teachers are absolutely hungry for continual professional development, and innovation doesn't happen on the schedule. There's always new things that are coming up, and having that second person to support Phil's department will be not only needed, but it will be very much appreciated by our K-12 teachers and thereby our students as well.
And just in keeping with what Ms. Bray pointed out, there is a copy of the proposal for Infinite Campus here that we would be discussing and hopefully approving in January. So if you have any chance to look at that. And go ahead, Mark.
Steve's comments prompted a question. It is a huge change to go to Infinite Campus or to go to a new student information system. How painful do we expect the transition to be? Are any of our neighbors transitioning from the same tools to these tools who we can follow? Obviously, the training is a bit, and we know all of that needs to and can be planned, but inevitably these things are a little bit painful. Just how painful do we expect it to be?
Yeah, so North Penn is using eSchool and is transitioning to Infinite Campus. And what's beautiful there is that Infinite Campus discovered some real pain points and simply wrote the software to solve those pain points. So that exists, right? Those tools, it's so great to not be the first person to swim through the sharks, because then the sharks are all busy with that person and you get through. So it's great. Those tools are in place, so that piece is nice. And this I think can use the school to do like we do. And so there will be that integration as well, right? And although we're doing it at the same time, at least you have that many more brains working. Now, Infinite Campus and Schoology, by all accounts, other districts that are using both, they say it's flawless integration. They use the standard one roster standard, which is just a smarter way of doing this pass back of information. So we will be in good company there. Yeah, but it is going to be a monumental amount of work. But that's kind of the nature of what we do. Next project, right? It's all good.
Who's it a monumental amount of work for? Everyone or?
It will be for everybody. There will be, my department, Peter Velacci will be doing a phenomenal amount of work. There will be all the PD that needs to happen, and with that we do a lot of turnaround training. Then there will be also a lot of work working with HR to make sure the flow from e-finance right into Infinite Campus is good. They have their own module for that, but that's something we don't want to change everything at once, and then that's a holistic look that the business department can take and make, yes, that's a fit or no, right? If they have a special education module, our special education folks will look at Infinite Campus's module, and it was not a fit for that. Yeah, that's your question. And Infinite Campus ahead of time said, this is not really our wheelhouse. We have a pretty solid tool, but you might not want it. And I asked them, of all the tools out there, who do you recommend? Who do you see people partnering with the most? They said, well, they're new, but Frontline has this great tool, and this is fantastic. We have a fantastic integration with them, and that happens to be the tool that Michelle's excited for. So that's great. It's a natural fit, and it really is about making the best tool work for that department. So those two houses, for them, there will be a lot of work. It's going to be an all hands on deck project. It's a big thing.
So if there aren't any other comments or questions, I'm going to ask the committee if we are able to move this ahead for January for approval. Okay, we recommend moving it ahead. Thank you, Mr. Van Grove.
I'm going to
changing technology here. Maybe we could move on with some of the other items down below.
Sure, if
If it meets everyone's approval.
do we have any announcements, Ms. Ray?
None this evening.
None this evening. We do have minutes. If you have any minutes from the November 29th meeting, if you have any comments or changes, please let us know. The next item on the list while we're preparing for the last presentation is the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology budget. Ms. Ray?
Thank you. Eastern and actually the MCIU have their budgets to us early for our consideration, and then we need to get board approval on this on January 28th. You will note what our 1920 allocation or contribution is down from the current year, $529,265 for the next year's budget. I don't know if Dr.
How many students is that?
I was going to say 33 to 35, but thank you.
Okay. Any comments or questions on the Eastern Technology budget?
Isn't it just a formula based on the number of students, so there's not that much we have to question?
It's a 3-year average.
Yes, it's a formula.
So if you see the number, if you see our contribution is less, you can reach a conclusion. It's a 3-year average. In terms of where we are with our other districts.
As far as the number of students, percentage-wise.
But that's a separate issue than approving the budget item.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions then on the Eastern Technology budget? No? If that's okay, we'll move that forward then also for the meeting. Okay, good. Let me know when you're ready.
I was going to say, since Mr. B is here and they've taken care of it, so we are ready for the projection model.
Okay.
Although I do, Jen, if we pull up the assessment sheet, let's take a look at that first.
Okay. Assessment formula.
Yes, and this has actually been updated, what you're looking at now, even from yesterday, or when it was posted on Tuesday. What we're doing here is taking a look back at the assessment over the last 10 years, since all the way back to 2009. And you'll note that we've had some years where we've had significant decreases as of January 1st, always holding, or excuse me, July 1st as our comparison. Doing the calculation and then dividing it by 9 yields an increase, thanks Jen, of 0.12%. When Ms. Baltasano and I were discussing this today, you'll note that over 9 years, we've only had an increase, relatively speaking, only had an increase of $24 million in our assessed value when we do a year-to-year comparison as of July 1st. And over to the right, you'll notice real estate taxes that have either been lost or gained depending upon assessment appeals or growth. And that amount over the last 9 years is $920,000. So that was a bit interesting to look at those totals. I've been focusing always on the average and the changes. We agreed last month to use 0.25 as far as our assessment growth in our projection. And part of that is optimistic because over the last 9 years, we've really had 0.12%. So, and you will also know.
Can I just briefly interrupt? Is this available to us, or should I relocate
It's
it?
different, it's different up there.
Yes, and we can post the new ones, but I wanted to do this because it's interactive. Okay, thank you, Mr. Sirota. So as of July 1st of 2018, you'll notice that we're up to $2,288,000,000. A nice increase over the previous year. But last month when we were chatting, Mr. Sirota and I indicated that we had another really nice bump since the first of the year. So if you'll notice down on lines 39, 40, and 41, that since July 1, or since what we posted or were to use as of July 1, we've had 3 reverse appeals that have been added to the assessment, for a total of an additional $15,626,900 of assessed value. The good news for this, you're going to actually see those numbers mentioned again, or the property addresses for 135 Commerce, 335 Commerce, and 602 Office Center Drive, because they've generated some nice interim taxes for the current year that we're going to propose transferring. So there's kind of a theme going on here with one-time revenue. And we just received yesterday afternoon the December assessment changes. So Regency, you'll note 13 homes have been added in the last month to the assessment base by the Board of Assessment. Washington Manor, 3 homes. And then you'll also note that there's been a reduction due to the assessment appeal that we settled and how much that's going to impact. So far for the current year, we're up, and it is very positive. But if we take, Jen, if you would put where the 0.25% is, if we go and we put 0.12, you know, 0.1%, you'll note that the amounts change fairly dramatically as to how much additional revenue they will be generating. And we use 2.3 over in column E that has to do with what the tax increase might be. We chose Act 1 index, which is what we're going to be talking about in the projection as well. But if we decrease that, you'll once again note the amount will decrease. Change it to 1.99. Not a big decrease over on that particular side. So in summary, just what I want us to kind of glean from this as we move into the projection model, we do have a really nice trend and period going on. But of course, you know, with me, I always have to come up with maybe perhaps an equalizer or the balancing. We have approximately $11 million at risk, if you will, currently under assessment appeals. So I don't need to tell you that that $11 million, if that's settled, that will basically wipe out the $15 million that we've added so far this year. We also have, would want to, you know, consider what that amount annual amount of tax revenue. That's approximately, you know, between $370,000 to $400,000 a year. So things are on really a great trend for 18-19, but there's always the bigger view out there, at least in the short term. We talked about Promenade earlier coming on. We've got another development, 55 coming in. So that's all very positive, but just want us to think about the entire picture. And we could go in and subtract that $11 million and, you know, have it come back down pretty quickly.
Not to go veering off the topic completely, but I know you've discussed it in the past, but just in general, do we have an idea of how our assessment values here compared to, say, Wissahickons?
Actually, we had reason to do a comparison internally. I'm sure we haven't shared that. Wissahickon has a very different tax base than what we have. And so we have some, let's go ahead and do Wissahickon, please, Jen. So you will note, if you're looking at the change of assessment value for us compared to Wissahickon, and I'm not focusing so much on the graph, they're nice, but if you look down at the numbers below, we hadn't changed in Upper Dublin, you know, 2.247 back in 2013, and this hasn't been updated for the current year, and it's at $2,255,000 for 1/1 of 2017. And Wissahickon, on the other hand, has gone from $3.6 billion, 3.621, to all the way up to $3,691,000,000, about a $70 million increase during the same period of time. Different districts, different tax bases, but it
Makes a big difference.
it really does. And it also helps to keep tax rates probably a bit lower.
Any other questions?
And if you want to jump back just to just trying to graphically represent what has happened here, you know, you could change the legend, and you will note that as far as the bars are concerned, we are more level on, and we've had some nice increases. But even month to month, we have some drops. We have 1,300 that's just been recorded. We're going to have 1,301, the assessment appeal, and that's going to decrease this again. And again, I have referenced some of the larger amounts that are still sitting, waiting to be finalized as far as assessment appeals. But due to the time, like I said, the hour, when we jump to the projection. Go ahead and please turn, I think, to revenue sheet. Yes. We're going to spend most of our time, I think, on the revenue area. And what we have here, because what drives our local revenue is the assessment times the millage rate. So if we start to make some changes on those two particular assumptions, we're going to see some differences. So Jen, why don't you take, let's go to the assessment base, which we have built in at 0.25, a 1/4%. Well, I'm sorry, before we jump away from that, notice along the top where we are right now with a 0.25% each year of increase in assessment. And then what we had for our tax increases of 2.4, which is over on the other screen that we just kind of slid off. You'll note that our projected total revenue for 2019 and for the years out from that does result in a negative amount, a decrease in fund balance or an operating balance that's in the red. So if we start to manipulate some of those variables, the 0.25%, let's change that to 0.12. Because that's really what is closer, you know, to being actual. And you want to go ahead and just stretch it out. Yes, please. Now, obviously, using that assumption or making that change, we're ignoring what's going to be happening in the future as far as what's happening with the assessment and the new properties. So that's a negative, you know, long-term view. But just to show you what can happen with a particular piece of the projection model. And then if we were to go back to the slide back to the left for the amount of the millage increase, and we decided last time to use the index.
Excellent.
But if we manipulate that or lower that again to 1.99, the same as last year, and then move along, just keeping that the same. You know, we go from 6.5 to 7.9. So just things for us to consider as we move forward. And if you could just just go backwards to change both of the assumptions. In other words, go back to the 2 point. Yes. Go ahead and change it back to what it was, 2.5. If it were earlier in the evening, I think it would be interesting for us to sit and change the assessed value and look at and compare it to where we are currently seated instead of where we have been, and then also manipulate the data using the $11 million that we still have at risk. But let's go back and change even the tax increase assumptions to what we had stated, the 2.3 and the 2.4. And you'll recall that we indicated that we would input the debt as we currently have it. The $9.7 million that has been borrowed is reflected in there. But the other numbers are the amounts of debt for Sandy Run is what has been projected to date. And I was speaking with Ms. Doyle, and after the first of the year, we will start to try to update those figures. So we will have those to better serve us. The piece, if we're looking at the projections that we don't have incorporated, are transfers. Although we have the debt incorporated for Sandy Run, do remember over the past few years, we've been transferring money every year to capital projects to fund our capital plan. So this is the brief period of time where we're going to try to have the two integrate. And Jen has to go to a different part of the model in order to be able to put in, let's say, $2 million. Because for the last few years, we've been taking what was called the debt fall off, and now we're going to be using it to pay for Sandy Run. If we add $2 million to each of those years moving forward, of course, that's going to have a negative impact on our balance at the end, on the concise summary. So it's something that we have to plan for and consider how much that we can afford each year and how we control the expenses to make sure that we don't fall into the red or have a negative balance. One last piece that we might want to do, again, on all of our salaries, we came up with certain assumptions. And for the teachers, we have 2% is what we have discussed. If we change that to 3%, it's interesting to know how that impacts 3% over the life of the thanks. Just one small amount, because of course, as we know, anytime we touch and change salary amounts, we also have to impact PSERS and revenue and FICA cost as well as the revenue amounts of money. So,
Does that just get percolated through by the model?
yes, it does. Okay. Yes, we don't have to do that. Thank goodness, otherwise we would do several more steps. We typically only, if we want to slide down and just look at some of the graphs that we have that show the changes, and Jen, there is actually one of the revenues and expenses that's the line graph, the red and the, no, it's a linear. Down below, you can see that that the difference between revenues and the expenditures does increase. However, we've made some changes to our assumptions, and so we'd have to go back and we can continue to change the variables as we want to talk about the model and where we will be in the future. In the past, we've only really looked at this in the fall. I think that with some of the changes that are coming and a conversation about our capital plan, that we may want to start looking at this maybe in May, about the time we pass the budget, just so that we are striving to incorporate and to connect our capital project long-term plan as well as our financial plan. Certainly, if any of the board members, if any of you would like for us to change any of the variables right now, or if we should bring this back in future months, just, you know, we can make the changes now, or you can ask us at a later time to bring it back.
Would anyone like to add anything, or we can bring this back at any time on request?
I don't want to ask anything, look at anything right now, but it's useful when we're making some decisions like what tax increase we want for the year to have this so that we can, when we talk about the different levels potentially, we can look at the impact.
I think, and we can certainly have, trot out the model in February or March. And when we've had a chance to see what continues to happen with assessed value too.
Right, when we're actually talking about the sections of the budget, we can. Right.
All right, thank you. Any other
Comments or
comments
questions?
or questions for tonight?
Questions? Dr. Yanni?
Ms. Brian, Ms. Balsano, thank you. I do think it will be a good idea, at least every other month, to bring these projections out, because I think it will keep everyone focused on the impact of the decisions we make. Not just assessed value and tax increases, but also when we talk about, if we're going to add a position to the budget or a number of positions to the budget or remove positions from the budget. One of the things in one of my recent coffee talks that we had, I had questions about, am I looking at some additional programs to add to our schools? And what I said was, if we look to add anything, there has to be a plan to sustain it over time, because I don't want to start something and then rip those opportunities from kids. So I think either every month or every other month, it would be helpful to look at this, especially as we sort of refine our numbers through the budget process.
And there's something that we might also consider too, moving forward, although Ms. Baldassano might, is we could periodically have this become part of our treasurer's report if we wanted to make some, some changes along that line. Maybe not every month, but, have that be something that we can look at when we make decisions.
That would be helpful. Mr. Soroka?
The thing I found most useful for in the past, and I think I still do, is to look at the order of magnitude of change. If we're looking at it as a percent of taxes, is that a big change or a little change compared to something else? So I like the idea of adding, if we add a position that has a salary of this, what's the actual, so salary of, I'm making up a number, 70,000, what's the actual cost of that? It will percolate through, we can actually see that kind of thing. So I like the idea of adding more things to that sort of order of magnitude comparison. I don't actually find the bottom line all that informative, but those orders of magnitude I think are very helpful.
Sure. Like adding another psychologist that was discussed this evening. Yeah, as an example.
And one of the things, if we bring it back periodically too, is medical. We have medical in here currently at an assumed rate. Our first look was quite favorable. So if we, were to bake that in right here, our bottom line or the change of magnitude would change, or obviously, not to be redundant. That piece is easier to do rather than trying to incorporate it right quickly into a monthly treasurer's report or anything.
So I would like to maybe plan on having it back next month for the committee meeting.
Maybe February,
Okay.
if that would be, because I think we'll have a couple more presentations.
Okay.
Curriculum, if you don't mind. That's the reason for my delay a month. We'll have some our curriculum, and Mr. Lester should be here as well. So let's get some more dollars, individual budgets to
And gives us a chance then to add those to it. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? No? Okay, we're gonna move on then. Now we're down to an item repository sale.
Yes, this is something new for me in all the years. There's a piece of the tax exempt property that's adjacent to someone's home, and they've been kind of more or less unofficially maintaining it. And they put in a bid, if you will, to purchase the property for only $500. We would be sitting, if the board approves this, we will receive the $500. We will be adding $500 to the assessment base. But anyway, I would suggest that we do this. I've spoken with Mr. Nardo, as has Ms. Braccio, and a check. This has gone through our council and our solicitor.
And it's very unusual.
As I said, it's the first time in, 13 years in Montgomery County I've run into this. Oh, I do want to call attention to the fact that the initial letter was dated November 13th, 2016, and we, the county was even able to produce the information that it was delivered, but somehow the offer never made its way to the business office. So that's the reason for the delay, but all the information is still correct and salient as
Okay.
posted.
Anyone have any other questions? Mr. Robsky?
Yes, how many square foot is this property, you know?
I didn't bring that information with me. It's it's a very small piece of property. I can,
I mean, like, how was it, did we get this land, the school district get this land? Is it adjacent to an old school or something?
no, it's adjacent to someone's house and it's been an exempt piece of property.
Oh,
It's in Upper Dublin. We
it's
don't
not.
own it or anything.
Well, who owns it? Yeah.
It's exempt and it's actually sitting in a repository at the county. In fact, no one really owns it. So this gentleman wants to own it because he says, I want to take care of it and have it, be represented with the rest of the property. I guess it's overgrown and not particularly attractive.
Mr. Sirota?
It's 5,250 square feet. So pretty small, assessed value of 3,340. I mean, yeah. And it is listed as owned by Montgomery County.
Yes,
Yeah.
again, on the repository. And thank you. I knew that the amount was very small and I had seen it, but
So,
The township has to agree with this too.
good question.
Township has to agree with this?
the township has agreed with it, is my understanding. They're now waiting
Is
for
there any
us.
legal fees that we're doing here? Or?
If there are any legal fees, they will be responsible for that. I suppose technically there will be transfer tax and everything else related to $500, but
Oh, gosh. Okay. If it's all right, I guess then, we'll move this forward, if it's okay with the committee for next month. Okay?
And thank you, Mr. Sirota, for looking at the 5,250 feet. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. All right, I guess we're on to the Department of Labor and Industry Adjustment of Base Bid Amounts.
Yes, this is just the annual increase in the bid amounts and the amount for telephone quotations. Every year, January 1, the amounts are updated. If we've had a policy committee meeting during December, I'm sure this would have been discussed there. We'll just pass it through on finance.
This is standard,
It is.
very standard. Does anyone have any questions on this one? Is it okay then to move forward for the meeting? Okay, we'll move that forward for next month. The fabulous IRS mileage rate, always exciting.
Yes, another very standard, usually once a year. It's just been published. The rate will go up to 58 cents per mile. So if we could put that on the agenda for January, it will be retroactive to January 1st.
Is it okay to move this forward also? Okay, good, thank you, we will move that forward.
Thank you.
Now, a little more involved, transfer from general fund capital projects fund.
Yes, again, when we were discussing this change in the assessment, we noted 3 particular properties where we had one-time revenue. And we're recommending, administration's recommending that these amounts, which total $515,000, be transferred to capital projects fund at the January meeting.
Right, these are one-time
Interim taxes
interim taxes.
that resulted from the increased assessment.
Does anyone have any questions on this?
I think we always want to transfer money when it's one-time money. However, what are the implications of the other assessment appeals that we're facing, and how are we gonna handle those?
Excellent question. The large assessment appeals that might be ruled against us. We have $960,000 in fund balance that could be used. It's been committed to that. And actually, that might be something that we look at increasing as the year continues. But we've had a practice in the past of moving these one-time amounts aside, and we'll be buying buses for the next year. So at this point in time, it's early in the year. Recommendation is to transfer to that.
So, and how did you decide which amounts of money to transfer to capital projects versus debt service?
Actually, it's a type of money. Interim being usually a larger one-time amount, and the other amounts were the transfer tax pieces that had just come through. The transfer tax subtotal $153,000, a much smaller amount. The majority of that $448,000 is related to Sandy Run Middle School. We had budgeted about $447,000 because we thought we would take out the money sooner than what we did. So the amount that we're paying will only be $202,000. Rather than have this go to transfer, have it be transferred to debt, because that's where that started. And that will also be favorably received by Wall Street, that we put more money in our debt service fund.
Does anyone have any questions on this? So these two items are kind of hand in hand here, transfers. If it's okay, we'll move this forward for next month. All right, we will move it forward. And then finally here we have budgetary transfers.
This is the laundry list that are generated through the audit in order to have it be correct. Last month we did have some budgetary transfers in the current year. These are all related to the previous year. So to finish out 17-18. And incidentally, we received electronically our 2017-18 single audit yesterday. So we'll be putting that on the January 17th agenda to discuss, and then ask for the board to accept it also at the same night that they approve the transfers on January 28th.
Any comments or questions on the budgetary transfers? And we can move those forward as well. Okay, all right. If there aren't any other comments, there are no members of the community here for community input, so we will skip that, and basically we are done with, unless anyone has anything else to say, we will be adjourning. Our next Finance Committee meeting will be held on January 17th at 7 p.m., immediately following the Operations Committee meeting, and we are therefore adjourned.